Hi all, welcome to Mac Truck's Book Stop. If you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, have a discussion. We are going to go into the nice warm cabin to continue the video on this camping trip, and hope you enjoy. Representing Italy, Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities is a very interesting book because there's not much story, so to speak of. If there is any story, it's Marco Polo arrives in the Far East and talks with Kublai Khan, the emperor of the great Khan Empire, the Mongol Empire at the time, and they have talks about all of the places that Marco Polo has been, cities he's visited, specifically cities he's visited. Now, this is hardly even a story because it's quite small sections of the book. Most of the book is kind of just this list of incredible, improbable, strange, even futuristic sometimes, cities that Marco Polo has been to. So if we were to take this literally, Marco Polo is talking about these fictitious cities that don't exist, and they are being described in terms that Marco Polo could not have even understood in his time. So it would be pretty silly to take this story literally. Now, this book is really kind of a mental exercise, an exploration. You might call it postmodern in a way because it deconstructs what a probable city could be in order to show something or the other, and you can interpret it how you want. I guess that's one way of looking at it, but I want to start by saying that Italo Calvino, I hadn't really heard of him before this book. He was born in Cuba, lived there for the first 2 years of his life, and then, went to Italy with his family and at 2 years old, and has also lived in other places in Europe. He's I would say a contemporary author. This book was written in the 70s, 1972, and his lifespan is 1923 to 1985. So with that context, it's written in a somewhat older style. The language is flowery, the language is a little bit archaic to fit, Marco Polo talking with Kublai Khan, but the ideas are quite contemporary. There's some conversations of Marco Polo and Genghis Khan that verge on exploring solipsism a little bit, where the whole world could just be inside your head kind of thing, which those were not my favorite parts of the book. My favorite parts of the book were the descriptions of the city. I'll give a couple examples, and they're laid out. They're assigned kind of themes. So there's cities in memory, there's cities in desire, cities in signs, thin cities, trading cities, and each one is given a number. So if there's multiple thin cities, for example, and they'll be labeled 1, 2, and so on as the chapter, but they're not in order. They're kind of spread throughout the book. And there's 9 parts to the book. So the structure of the book is pretty complex. But now, yes, I'll give some examples of the cities. One that really sticks in my mind was for cities and eyes. There's a city where the whole city is built along the water, and everything in the city, literally everything, is mirrored in the water. And so I'm just imagining this city that's built completely as a facade, basically, so that even even the windows of the houses are made so that you can see through them, and every little thing is mirrored. Everything in the city is mirrored in the water. So you have 2 cities, one that's a reflection and one that's above, and then a little paragraph kind of pondering on the significance of this, what this means to the lover, the assassin, and they're kind of these mental exercises, right? Little things to think about or roll over in your head Some of them I thought were kind of okay. I think I get what he's saying, but didn't really find it profound. But then there were others that I was like, oh, that's quite profound. And so if you would like to explore kind of this journey through all of these possible fantastical cities, some of them even kind of verge on the metaphorical, where it's hard to even picture it's not something physical, it's just a way or a perspective of seeing the city in general. If you would like that sort of journey to get all these perspectives, all these kind of fantastical, imaginative cities, um, almost more of a thought experiment, this is a great book. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I will probably read it again or page through it and find passages that I like. Another example of a city that's a little bit. All the cities are named after women. I should say that they're all fictitious, and some of them are just like. Another one is it's a big plateau, and there's all these different cities that you see connected across the plateau. But what all the people do is they live in one of these cities, and then when the majority of people get bored of whatever they're doing, their day job, their daily life, they move to another city, another one of these cities. So I am imagining in my head kind of this hexagonal plane where these people are kind of moving, migrating from city to city, but in one lifetime, they'll never come back to the same one. So I'm just imagining the lights of the city kind of moving from one to the other over time as one lights up and then all the others go dark. So, and again, most of these are very short. Almost none of these are more than like 1 or 2 pages. The chapters are very short, bite-sized. I literally read this in its entirety in one camping weekend, and it was not a lot of time, maybe 5 hours total of reading or less. And it's short, bite-sized, but there's a lot to think about. You can go over it again and imagine things in different ways and turn it over in your mind. So that's the book. And now I want to enter the spoiler section a bit, although I don't think I'm going to be spoiling very much at all, just by talking about the things in it, but I will give away some of kind of the key moments of the book that could shift your thinking of the book as you go, which are interesting moments in their own right. So if you want to read this, if it sounds interesting, go read it. And now I'll begin talking about my thoughts on the rest of the book. So, now that anyone who doesn't want spoilers is gone, I want to say that as this camping trip draws to a close, and I think of the logs, the fire fading on the logs behind me, I think of the ashes of many of the cities that are mentioned in this book. There's a lot of these entries, quite a few of these entries that talk about the death of the city or the vanishing of the city, or how the people living in it deal with the idea that it will eventually end. There are others that focus on the theme of desire, of people imagining what is the ideal city and how to achieve it. There's one city where there's a glass dome, or these glass domes where there's all these models of the city built. So it's almost like a metaphor for the government or planning of a city, and how there's all these people that have an ideal version of how it should be. That could go beyond government, just all these people, architects or engineers or whatever, and all of these models stay there, but none of them have ever come to fruition. So they just remain kind of these museum pieces. And the city, and it's because when you create the ideal version of the city is already changing. It's already alive. A lot of these point to the fact that cities are alive. They're like organic things that cannot be completely rationalized. Um, there's hidden cities where it talks about how there's there's whole cities within cities that people don't even recognize. There are I want to say that there was a point in this book where I wasn't sure if I was going to end up liking it at the end, and that it was kind of just this city after city, and I wasn't sure where it was going or what it was trying to say, and I didn't think that there was going to be kind of a complete message, and maybe there isn't. Maybe it's all kind of bricks of thought experiments that fit together to form an arch. There's actually a metaphor that Marco Polo says to Kublai Khan in one moment, but um, there is one moment in the book where Kublai Khan kind of realizes that all these cities that Marco Polo is talking about can't possibly be real, that he's kind of stringing them along. And Marco Polo, at one point, Kublai Khan says, well, why don't you just tell me start with Venice, like where you're from, tell me about Venice in its entirety, then move on to the next city. Because Marco Polo admits, what I'm really talking about is Venice, and so what Marco Polo reveals is that all of these stories that all these stories of cities that he's seen are actually saying something about Venice. You could read the book that way. You could read the book as all of these cities are really talking about the same city. You could also read the book that all of these cities are talking about all cities. You could also read the book that cities themselves are reflective of the universe as a whole. There's even a few entries about that where people conceive of their city as reflecting the cosmos, and the reverse of it, that the city creates the cosmos. There's one that I really enjoyed towards the end that was a reversal of the sort of, old civilization that models their city and their civilization after the stars. But we hardly ever think about maybe the ancients built these monuments thinking that they could influence the stars with them. And it's that reversal, which I thought was cool. And so there's a lot of ways to read this book. It doesn't give you definitive answers. And there's a lot of talk between Kublai Khan and Marco Polo about the interaction of past and present. When you talk about all these cities, you're talking about them in the past because they've evolved. And contained within these cities, as another section says, are lives that are being lived that you will never live. And you're seeing all of these things that you will never live around you. Trajectories. You get put in your place when you pass through these cities. And there is also a sense of, towards the end of the book, it starts to become more clear that this is also talking about humanity's struggle against the way, the baseline of the world is this nature. What is the nature of nature? And actually in the final chapter, I thought it was very interesting that this is actually the final lines of the book. So again, if you're still watching after I told you I was going to spoil some things, really just walk away, because the final lines of the book tied everything together for me. So Kublai Khan is looking over this atlas. Kublai Khan has an atlas that contains every conceivable map ever made. Kind of like the Library of Babel in Borges, which maybe I'll talk about for Argentina at some point. But Kublai Khan's looking through this atlas that contains every map of every possible city in the world that could ever be, that ever was, that is now. And he says, It is all useless if the last landing place can only be the infernal city, and it is there that, in ever-narrowing circles, the current is drawing us in. And Polo said, "The inferno of the living is not something that will be. If there is one, it is what it is already here, the inferno where we live every day, that we form by being together. There are two ways to escape suffering it. The first is easy for many. Accept the inferno and become such a part of it that you can no longer see it. The second is risky and demands constant vigilance and apprehension. Seek and learn to recognize who and what, in the midst of the inferno, are not inferno, and make them endure, give them space." And I think in that final line is where it all kind of came together for me, that these thought experiments are not looking to describe what the city is. They're looking to find what we should hold dear, what is good about the city, because cities are truly the creation of man. It is us imposing what order we can upon the environments, the world, the inferno that we are part of. And why do we say inferno? Why do we refer to nature as inferno? Because life is hard, life is difficult. If you look at history throughout time, and up till now, it is only in the present day that we've conquered so many things that we've taken for granted, certain diseases, birth complications. We haven't completely conquered them, we haven't completely brought order to them, but certainly, if you look at history, there's a big difference even 100 years ago. So I'll stop my preaching, but that's what this is, I think, personally, I think is referring to. And it brought, starting to work backwards, some of the last cities were my favorites as far as what they said, where it talks about Berenice as one city that is described as a temporal succession of different cities, alternately just and unjust. The justice of the city is just but hides another kind of injustice. So justice comes and tries to solve that injustice with unjust means. And so you have this sort of progression. Society progresses, technology progresses, but the seeking of justice always reveals new injustices. For example, before that, this I would say is one of my favorites, is Hidden Cities number 4, nearly at the end of the book, where it talks about how the city Theodora, which I wonder if that's like a connection to Constantinople, because Theodora was one of the most famous queens, I believe. I don't know, that just kind of came into my head. I didn't double check it, but recurrent invasions have racked the city of Theodora in the centuries of history. That's how it begins. They've been attacked by all kinds of animals, condors, serpents, spiders, all these predators, and then their most dangerous enemy was the rodent. And I wonder if that's like a connection to the plague. But so each generation of rodents got stronger and stronger, and there was like this rodent and human war in the city of Theodora with massacres and everything. And then finally, humans had conquered all the animals, and that's what they thought. But other fauna, non-extinct species, other fauna came back to light from the library's basements, it says, where the incunabula were kept. And these creatures were sphinxes, griffins, chimeras, dragons, harpies, hydras, to reclaim possession of their city. Now, there's a few different ways to think of this. Was it talking about the sort of Lovecraftian, like, we are small and unimportant, or like at some point all will be reduced to dust, and these chimeras and all this represents just sort of the things we can't understand? I don't know. What I like better is thinking of that as the representation of how humans have to create enemies, always have to create new enemies to fight, whether they exist or not. And we find them. We find the enemies in the dark, or that those enemies are always there. That basically the inferno around us, as the end of the story says, the inferno We are in the inferno, and even if we eliminate all of our natural enemies, well, we kind of kill ourselves too, because you can't just completely destroy your environment. And sort of that unknown that comes after is what is represented by the chimeras and everything. That's another way to look at it. Again, just rambling. Maybe there's really no better way to think of it or analyze it than the kind of poetic way that Italo Calvino does here. There's another part of the book where it mentions that, or Marco Polo says, what I'm doing here is eliminating all of the improbable, imagining or conceiving of all these improbable cities in order to reduce to the probable what could be. But yet you cannot reduce it to only the completely probable, because if you only have the completely probable, you will no longer have, it'll be so probable that it's not probable. So it's kind of that silly semantic game, I guess, but I think it does have some interesting things to think about there. Some people might find this book a bit pretentious and doesn't do it. I did at times, but overall I enjoyed it and I will go back to it, and I think it has some interesting things to think about. And if nothing else, it's very evocative. It makes you think of certain images, and I enjoy sort of imagining these strange cities that he's talking about and then taking them a bit further in my mind and exploring them in my mind. I actually think that's fun. It's a fun book. You can just look at it as a fun book too. So those are just a few thoughts. Someday, I think when I reread it, I would like to do another video about it, or an analysis, and maybe say something more put together, maybe, a little bit more scripted, an essay kind of thing on this book. But it really stands out among the books I've read so far, and I'm happy to not just be completing this list with only historical fiction and things like that. I'm trying to mix it up, and also mix up my backgrounds, as you can see. So I thought this camping trip was a great opportunity, not only to read this little thin book that I knew I could probably get through, but also to have a rustic background, which is kind of a contradiction because this book is about cities. So I'm out here talking about that, but it's quite an interesting read. I recommend it. Once again, if you like the video, please like and subscribe. Please comment if you have read the book and enjoyed it. If you disagree with me, if you agree with me, I just like to have discussions about books, see new ways of seeing things, all the perspectives of the city that this contains. I think I could read it again, trying to imagine every city's name being replaced by the same city, or just X, or all cities. Because as I read it, I did try to conceive of them of different cities, but there are a lot of common threads. And there's some cities even built of just threads suspended above the abyss and things like that. So it's all kinds of craziness. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day, week, wherever you are, whatever you are, and we'll come back next time to watch the continuation of this Reading the World series. Thank you.